Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. We're about 1 week into Ukraine's invasion of Russia, Ukraine's own special military operation. And President Zelensky for the first time acknowledged that the armed forces of Ukraine are conducting operations inside of Russia. In his nightly address on Saturday, the Ukrainian president mentioned pushing on to the aggressor's territory. So for operational security, the Ukrainian government is waiting 3 or 4 days to comment on anything. The armed forces of Ukraine are waiting 3 or 4 days to release any pictures or videos. When we go on the military map, deepstatemap.live, we can zoom into the Kursk region, and this map isn't accurate. It's about 3 or 4 days outdated. So I will show you a more up-to-date map. Here's what the front lines looked like probably about 2 or 3 days ago. And it's expanded since then. What happened is there were 2 defense lines, one right on the border and another one about 5 kilometers deep. The Ukrainians on day 1 smashed through these Russian defense lines. And it's just open skies. They can go north, they can go west, they can go south. There's not much opposition. Russia did not expect this. They didn't think this would ever happen. So on this map, you can clearly see the settlement of Zivda has been completely occupied by Ukrainian forces. The population of this Russian village is about 5,000 people. And we have on-the-ground videos released by the Ukrainian military. So once again, all of this occurred probably more than 4 days ago. But here's a video I want to share of a Ukrainian tank driving through this Russian village.
Центральна площа Суджі.
First thing I noticed from this video is Ukraine didn't have to destroy every single building to take this town. That's something that the Russian military can't do. Now, this town does look like it's in rough shape, but this might just be what an ordinary Russian town looks like. Ukraine didn't do anything to it. The roads are ripped up, but once again, this is probably from 2.5 years of the Russian military driving through this town, destroying the roads, the infrastructure, and not repairing it, not maintaining it. For an on-the-ground report from the city center of Zivda, here's the Ukrainian defender. This is what he has to say.
Отже, друзі, коротенько доповідь зроблю. Облазили ми майже всю суджу. Де ті підери там ховаються, я поняття не маю. Знаходимося, зараз я оберну відео, знаходимося майже в самому центрі, звідти тільки що прийшли. Коротше, для руснявих чепушил, які там розказують, ліплять, що суджа їхня, за щочку беріть і уйобуйте нахуй.
So the locals are staying indoors, or they fled, and the Russian armed forces are nowhere to be found. What few the Ukrainian armed forces have encountered in the city, they were quickly eliminated. So how much territory inside of Russia has Ukraine taken? Ukraine now controls around 1,000 square kilometers in Russia's Kursk Oblast, according to General Sursky. How many settlements is that? According to Deep State, the Ukrainian army now controls 44 Russian settlements, and those might be conservative estimates. Every day, the Ukrainian armed forces are still advancing in multiple directions, capturing more Russian cities and villages. Here's a partial list of the Russian settlements and cities that Ukraine has captured. I googled the population sizes of some of these villages, and it's possible that tens of thousands, if not more than 100,000 Russian civilians are now in occupied territory of the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military doesn't wish any of these people harm. If they want to evacuate or leave, they're being allowed to do so. But some of these people are choosing to stay, and they've been interacting with the Ukrainian military. I'll share a clip later, but here's a Ukrainian defender inside one of these Russian settlements, giving a report that he's not impressed with the snack and beverage selection at a local convenience store.
Дорогі українці, заїхав он в п'ятерочку. В п'ятерочку заїхав. Скажу вам, вибор не очень, а тебе лучше. Слава Україні! П'ятерочку ні, скоро тебе буде.
I don't know how to pronounce the name of this store, and I don't know what an ATB is, but he's saying that eventually they'll get the good stuff, snacks and drinks, brought into these occupied territories. Ukrainian Project releases video of captured Katarovites. Akhmat commander Apti Aludinov earlier claimed that his unit was stationed along the Kursk region border with Ukraine, but Ukrainian forces bypassed them, avoiding a direct engagement. There are lots of pictures and videos of captured Russian soldiers being tied up and brought back to Ukraine to be processed. I do want to say, I'll link some of these pictures and videos down below if you want to watch the videos. But these are the lucky ones. A lot of these guys are 18 or 19-year-old conscripts who didn't sign up for this. They were forced by their governments, and they were technically, yes, put on the front lines, and they weren't supposed to be. This video right here, these are Chechens, and when it comes to prisoner exchanges, conscripts and Chechens are the most valuable. When a Russian prisoner is forced to the front lines and then captured by Ukraine, Russia doesn't actually want them back. But conscripts and Chechens, they definitely do want back. And the reports are that hundreds of Russian soldiers have been captured or surrendered. They're being treated humanely according to the rules of international law. They're being brought back to Ukraine to be processed, and they will be exchanged at the first opportunity. Ukraine just wants their own people back. And this is pretty ingenious. I want to share the beginning of this clip. Ukrainian defenders are putting loudspeakers on drones and flying them out into buildings or wooded areas to convince these conscripts to not throw away their lives and to just surrender, and they'll be treated fairly.
Русский солдат, сдавайся. Твое командование скрывает правду о потерях. Сохраните верность. Гарантируем хорошее отношение.
That is a loudspeaker on a drone playing a message on repeat for Russians to just surrender, and Russians are choosing to surrender. Additionally, similar to when the Ukrainians caught the Russians off guard in the Kharkiv region, military equipment is being captured. This equipment being captured is being, once again, taken back to Ukraine to be processed and repurposed, and eventually will be used on the front lines against the Russians. I'll link this video down below, but this was a Russian tank that was abandoned. Ukraine found it, and once again, it's heading back to Ukraine to be repurposed. Putin demands that the Russian Ministry of Defense squeeze out the enemy from the Kursk region. So on Monday morning, Putin had this meeting to reassure the Russian people that everything's okay. I'm going to share a couple clips from this meeting with you. The first one involves an interaction between Putin and the governor of Kursk. The governor of Kursk, it's his turn to speak. He's giving a report, and Putin's going to abruptly cut him off. At present, the situation in the region is difficult. As of today, 28 settlements are under enemy control. The depth of penetration into the territory of the Kursk region is 12 kilometers, and the front's width is now 40 kilometers. That was the governor of Kursk. Putin's now going to cut him off, saying, "Listen, Alexei, the military departments will report on the width and depth. You tell us about the socio-economic situation and report on assistance to the people." That was good. Next clip, Putin is using his usual tough guy rhetoric, but the emperor has no clothes. Nobody takes Putin serious anymore, but I want to read this. "The gang leaders of the Kyiv regime not only commit crimes against the Russian people, well, in fact, they took the path of extermination of the Ukrainians themselves. Ukrainian people who apparently they do not consider their own. the losses of the Ukrainian military forces are increasing dramatically for them, including the most combat-ready units that the enemy is transferring to our border. The enemy will certainly receive a worthy response, and all the goals set before us will be achieved without any doubt. These are the words of a loser. This man is terrified. In his mind, this shouldn't be possible. Based on everything everyone tells him every day, this shouldn't be possible. Ukraine's military is supposed to be about to collapse. That's what he sees and hears from his propagandists and on Russian state TV. But he knows he's being lied to. And I'm going to play this clip as well. It appears that the enemy, with the help of his Western masters, is doing their will, and the West, using the hands of the Ukrainians, is at war with us. Apparently, the enemy seeks to improve its negotiating positions in the future. But what kind of negotiations can we ever talk about with people who indiscriminately conduct strikes at civilians and civilian infrastructure, or try to create threats to nuclear power facilities? Wow. So I think this is fascinating that Putin would even say this. Apparently the enemy seeks to improve its negotiating positions. Why would he say that? Unless negotiations are on his mind. His own country was just invaded. He's lost dozens of his own settlements. And all he can think about is, this might hurt me in future negotiations. Negotiations that I'm desperate to conduct. Here's the peace plan, Russia. Get the F out of Ukraine. Leave Ukraine. Give back all of their sovereign territory that you took by force. And Ukraine will do the same. That's the negotiation, that's the deal. But just look at the faces of Putin's top generals, of his top leadership during this meeting. Could these men look any more defeated? Could they look any more deflated and worried about what Putin is going to do to them? Because they're the ones responsible for this war. Putin started it. They all agreed to it by staying in the government. But if Putin wants to start liquidating people and punish them for their failures, these four guys should probably be the first ones to go. Meanwhile, social media is being flooded with videos and images such as this. Ukrainian defenders on the territory of Russia, ripping down their flags, ripping down their symbols, ripping down their monuments, and completely trashing them. For anyone still dumb enough to be supporting Russia, how do you explain this? How do you defend this? How do you continue supporting Russia when they're obviously not going to win this war? In Kursk, Ukrainians shattered through a $100 million fortification in a day. The Kremlin had spent over $109 million, over 2.5 years, building these fortifications in Kursk. How did Ukraine get through them in a single day? Garry Kasparov has a theory. Because $108 million of it was stolen. There's so much corruption and incompetence in the entire military chain of command that with every advantage that Russia had starting this war 2.5 years ago, they're going to lose, and they know it. Old habits die hard. Russian troops loot abandoned villages in Kursk. Discipline seems to be breaking down among some of Moscow's forces that are still reeling from Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region a week ago. I'll link this video down below if you want to see it for yourself, but this is a Russian soldier filming himself looting a house. He's not looking for food and water. He's looking for jewelry and electronics. He's a thief. And what happened was this Russian soldier filmed this on his phone. He was then captured by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, of course, are going to release the video. But this is who the Russian military is. They're willing to steal and rob from their own. They're willing to kill their own if they think it's in their own self-interest. How can a fighting force with this lack of discipline ever hope to beat a free people? because Ukrainians are fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their children, their families, their cities, and their freedom. As Ukrainian forces advance in the Kursk region, law and order in the frontline Russian-held areas is reported to have completely collapsed, with rampant looting, not just from Russian soldiers, but from other Russians. When the boot on their necks has been lifted momentarily, these people all just are turning on each other. As long as they don't interfere with the operations of the Ukrainian armed forces, Russians are going to do what Russians are going to do. So let's do some contrast here. You saw the meeting from Putin and his top generals. Let's now see what the demeanor and the attitude is of the Ukrainian armed forces. Now this room looks a little bit more confident and a little bit more relaxed than the other room. I will read for you what they say. This is President Zelensky speaking. First of all, today we will discuss the situation at the front, on our territories and the temporarily occupied territories, as well as the situation not only on our territory. I'll give the floor briefly to the Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi. Please proceed. So this is General Syrskyi on the screen, Mr. President of Ukraine, and he's the Commander-in-Chief. We continue to conduct an offensive operation in the Kursk region. Currently, we have about 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory under our control. The force groupings are fulfilling their tasks. Fighting is taking place virtually along the entire front. The situation is under control. Thank you. Please thank our servicemen for their resilience and the courage on behalf of all of us. Thank you. Ukraine reportedly is digging trenches in Kursk, here for the long haul. If reports of Ukrainian troops entrenching in Russia's Kursk region were true, it could mean Kyiv intended to hold the territories, potentially for future negotiations. That's what this is about. And what's hilarious is this is what Russia tried to do 4 or 5 months ago when they invaded Kharkiv. So, according to Russia's constitution, they annexed these 4 territories, and these are part of Russia. The problem is they annexed territory they never controlled. So they want the administrative borders of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. And when they reinvaded Kharkiv, they never annexed that territory. They were trying to steal extra territory, somewhere they thought Ukraine was vulnerable. And in future negotiations, they were going to say, we'll give you back your territory in Kharkiv if you give us the city of Zaporizhia, 700,000 people. It'd be a stupid trade, but that's what Russia wanted to do. So Ukraine, I guess, thought about that idea and said, you're actually pretty smart, Russia. How about we take some parts of Kursk, and in future negotiations, you give us back all of our territory, and we'll give you back all of your territory. I do want to say that Ukraine is not intending on keeping this territory. They've already publicly stated there won't be a referendum. They're not looking to violate international law by annexing the sovereign territory of another country. What kind of a madman would try to do that? So Ukraine is trying to be responsible. And people, once again, are trying to figure out, what are Ukraine's objectives? I just gave you one with trying to take some Russian territory as a bargaining chip in future negotiations. But this is also to take the pressure off everywhere else on the front line. Russia moves some units from Ukraine's south to the Kursk. So the Russians are diverting attention and resources, manpower and munitions away from Kherson, away from Zaporizhia, away from Donetsk. And this is buying Ukraine some time they desperately needed to pack up your stuff and move to another region and get settled and begin combat operations immediately. This is not a good day. This is a huge morale defeat for every Russian paying attention to this war. There's no positive way to spin any of this. Ukraine aims to destabilize Russia with the Kursk incursion. That could be a tertiary objective. Continue to weaken Putin. How can Putin look any weaker today than he's ever looked his entire political career in Russia? For 2.5 years, he's been threatening to use nuclear weapons. If Ukraine does this, if the West does this. And the armed forces of Ukraine are now occupying more than 40 Russian settlements on their sovereign territory. And Putin isn't going to use nukes. He never was going to. But for true Russian nationalists, Z-patriots, what do they have to think of their commander-in-chief when he won't even use nuclear weapons to defend their own territory? I think Putin has been severely weakened by this operation, and this can only hasten the downfall, the demise of the Russian state and the Putin regime. Militarily, they threw at Ukraine so much of what they had that they ended up having a large sector of Russia's border with Ukraine and their home territory unprotected and open for this ground assault. Weak border guards and frightened young conscripts were all they had in Kursk. They've been burning away everything. Everything. Tens of thousands of men, billions of dollars, thousands of Soviet vehicles, including those produced in the early Cold War era, all for the sake of taking a dozen abandoned towns in Ukraine, in the Donbass region, and letting Putin caress his bruised ego by watching his TV war propaganda. This can be compared to a stupid gambling addict who can't stop and who's frantically selling out everything he has and putting his family into debt to try to recoup himself again and again and again. There is a word for this. It's called the sunk cost fallacy, the phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they have invested heavily in it, even when it's clear that abandonment would be more beneficial. Putin's logic is, I've already lost so much, I have to keep going. I have to get some kind of win in Ukraine to justify all these losses. But he's never going to obtain any of his stated objectives. He's going to lose this war. And I'm being honest, if the Russian military gave up on all the occupied territories, retreated back to sovereign Russian territory, Putin could stay in power. He could potentially be the president of Russia for another 20 years. His people are so beaten and docile, they're never going to rise up against him. If he stopped now, if he stopped this special limited military operation today, he could salvage the Russian economy and stay in power for the rest of his life. But he's like a gambling addict. He can't stop. He thinks he needs to keep going. And there's so much more Russia can lose. It's going to get worse because Putin can't stop himself. Why Russia clings to gas lifeline amid Ukraine's Kursk incursion. Russia once used reduced gas flows to the European Union as a weapon to pressure the bloc into Kremlin-friendly policies. Now it is desperate to merely preserve the status quo. All these threats back in 2021 and 2022 of cutting off the gas to Europe, and everyone in Europe was going to be eating their pet hamsters by Christmas. Now Putin is desperate to keep the gas flowing. But the Russians are so stupid. They just bombed their own gas terminal. So this gas terminal in Kursk currently supplies about 50% of Russia's gas exports to the European Union. These are pipelines mostly going to Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia. On day one, Ukraine took control of this, and I was wondering, what's the Russian military going to do? Are they going to bomb their own critical gas infrastructure? And they did it. Here is the blue building, obviously hit with some kind of glide bomb. This is the building here. And then one of the terminals was damaged. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. The third one in this picture was hit with something. I don't think Putin probably approved this, but the Russian military is so reckless and stupid. Yeah, they just bombed their own gas terminal. the gas terminal that feeds gas to Russian-friendly countries like Hungary, Austria, and Slovakia. Russian forces dig trenches near the Kursk nuclear power plant as Ukrainian troops advance towards it. I don't think Ukraine is going to take this nuclear power plant, and the reason why is Russia is comfortable attacking a nuclear power plant. So let's say the Ukrainian military shows up at this Russian power plant, they've got tanks, they've got guns, and the plant chooses to surrender. Well, you now have the Ukrainian military inside a nuclear power plant, and the Russian military is eventually going to show up. Ukraine cares about life. Ukraine cares about not destroying a nuclear power plant that could spit radiation all over the European continent. But we've already established the Russian military doesn't care. So if Ukraine took this power plant, they can't defend it. Russia will just start bombing it and firing on it because they don't care. I just explained the logic why I think it would be a bad idea for Ukraine's military to go anywhere near this power plant. But if they want to go to it, adjacent to it and sabotage it, just cut the power lines so that maybe some close Russian cities no longer have power, there's an argument for doing that. YouTube is now no longer accessible inside of Russia. There were reports that Russia was going to do this the first week in September, but it looks like they were satisfied with just doing it now. YouTube is officially blocked. I think you can still access it with a VPN, but Russia is doing everything to crack down and block VPNs. And it looks like the divorce is amicable. Google AdSense has officially told all of their Russian YouTube partners they're not getting paid anymore. Yes, I think Russian military channels inside of Russia were never monetized, but there's a lot of independent creators inside of Russia doing gardening channels or makeup tutorials or music videos or whatever. They've all been demonetized. Any Russian inside of Russia trying to make money from YouTube now, they've been cut off because Putin decided to block YouTube. I can't imagine these Russian creators who depended on this money for their livelihood are going to be very happy. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Ukraine wrapped up at the Paris Olympics with 3 gold medals, 5 silvers, and 4 bronze medals. And Ukrainian fencer Karlin is deciding to auction off her gold-winning saber to fund cutting-edge military equipment. I can't play the video because there's music playing in the background, but this is the Ukrainian gold medal winning fencer choosing to auction off her saber. She is going to autograph it, and I guess on her Facebook page on August 15th, you can participate in the auction. You've probably seen this clip if you've been on social media at all the last 2 days. It's a feel-good, so I have to share it. But these are 2 Russian grannies, babushkas, who were walking and had an interaction with Ukrainian armed forces. These Russian grannies just asked if they could have a ride, and the Ukrainian defenders said they didn't have room in their truck. But one of these Russian ladies speaks Ukrainian in Kursk, and she spoke Ukrainian to these Ukrainian defenders.
Не ображають.
Та ні, ви нас не довезете, то ноги болять.
То в нас якби
У
тут
нас просто там амуніція, не маємо куди, чесно.
Ну ладно, потихеньку далеко йдемо.
Так, але ви українською говорите.
Та я хоч і не українка, але по-українськи, да.
Це, так що,
Слава Україні!
сади.
Ukraine's borders apparently don't end anywhere. Last clip I want to share with you is of Ukrainian defenders taking down a Russian flag. Every time they go into one of these Russian settlements, all the pictures of Putin and all the Russian flags are immediately taken down. And I think these are cool war souvenirs. I think these flags should be signed, dated, and kept. And if they auction them off, I think people around the international community would be happy to own some of these war trophies. But here's the video of another Russian flag coming down.
Не хватает, не можешь. Устаешь?
Отходи!
Отходи, отходи. Да бросай его нахуй. Да подожди.
Incredible. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.